Welcome back to another episode of Out of the Blank podcast. I'm here with Gil Jesus. He's been on many times. We've talked many times about the Kennedy assassination, varying aspects of it. We've talked more looking at the Dallas Police Department and some manipulation of evidence when it came to kind of accusing Oswald. Gil, do you mind introducing yourself to everyone out there listening?
Yes, my name is Gil Jesus. I'm a researcher on the JFK assassination. I've been doing it since, I'd say probably around 40, 50 years.
Now, before we get into the meat and potatoes of what we're probably going to be trying to attempt to talk about today, I want to ask you about the hearings, the JFK hearings. What did you think of that last one? That last one, I was actually gave me a little bit of hope in my step, I would say.
Yeah, I really didn't watch it
Damn.
because I didn't have the time to watch it, so I haven't seen it. But the way they were talking about it on the forum, I don't know. Some people like what was said, and some people tearing it apart. So I don't know. Who knows?
I thought it was interesting because I think one of the major points you needed to kind of have was it was Doug Horn. And he just mentioned in any scenario where it's a lone nut shooter, how do you have the autopsy change 4 times in 2 weeks? And it was kind of like a bomb where I think it sunk in for a lot of people that might not have known that, where it was like, yeah, that is kind of strange. And we needed more of that. We needed questions being or said or statements like that being said. Why could this be manipulated? Why is all the evidence we need to show that there was 2 shooters gone? Why is there things like this? And why is there so many lingering questions about where's Kennedy's brain? These are things that I felt like needed to be brought up. But clearly, 60 something years on, you come across a whole swath of information. Now, whether that information is accurate or whether maybe it's misconstrued because it was heard through somebody else, I think we're all at fault for doing that at times on both lone nut and conspiracy side. But I guess I want to kind of focus this episode on some other interesting points and stuff like that. But I wanted to talk about the varying theories. Clearly, you've been involved in the community for a while. What have you come across? What have you had to go back and relearn to understand more about the JFK assassination? Because sometimes there's things that are said by everyone, but no one can tell me what that source is, if that makes sense.
I think if you really want to try to get to the truth, you got to get rid of all of these crazy theories that are out there. Um, and the best way to understand the assassination is in its place in history. What was going on during the Kennedy administration? What was going on? Actually, it started at the end of World War II when the United States drifted to the right, and there were right wing extremists at the time. The deep state was right; it was right wing, and nowhere were there more right wing extremists than in Dallas. I mean, there was one guy that went and visited Dallas in 1961. I think he was from California. I don't know if he went there for a job or the purpose was for his visit, or he went to visit somebody. I'm not sure. But when he came back to California, he told his wife, if Kennedy ever goes to Dallas, this is in 1961 now, Kennedy ever goes to Dallas, they'll kill him. That's how much the atmosphere in Dallas was against Kennedy. People don't realize that the similarity, and I keep trying to point this out to people, and they won't listen to me on the forum. So I finally gave up. The similarity between the hatred for Trump today and the hatred for Kennedy back then. It's the same story. It's just different actors. And it's different sides of this political spectrum. Back then, you had the right wing that hated Kennedy. Now you've got the left wing that hates Trump. Both of them are deep states, and they're both entrenched. Trump has the advantage that he has people that he took in his cabinet that are going to help him try to root out this deep state, this what he calls the swamp. But there's a lot of political corruption in Washington, and I'm not sure that he's going to be successful. But this is what Kennedy and his brother were trying to do too. They were trying to root out the corruption in the government, and people completely they missed that.
You mentioned Dallas. I want to kind of get into that because obviously it gets mentioned when it comes to the motorcade route, when it comes to Dallas being the city of hate, all these types of things. If I'm not mistaken, it was Jesse Curry who went out there and told Dallas that they need to be like best behavior and stuff like that for when Kennedy was going to arrive. That's true, right? There's a video of that.
Yeah. And can you imagine that? The police chief has to go on TV and tell the city to behave themselves. I mean, I've never heard of that before. I've never heard of.
Now, when you look at that, Did you find it strange? Because I've been digging into the HSCA testimony of John Connelly. I mean, what's your thoughts on Connelly? Do you think he had some type of involvement? Do you think he was just someone that went along with the cover up aspect of things? I mean, I know he separated on the bullet that hit him was not the same one that hit Kennedy, but he still said that doesn't change my opinion on the conclusions the Warren Commission came up with. So, what is your opinion on Connelly? Maybe we can get into his testimony a little bit.
Well, I think if for the people that are saying Johnson was involved, I think they have to have Connolly involved too, because Connolly was Johnson's man. He was his campaign manager in 1948. He was the one that was responsible for the Box 13 scandal, and so. But then you got the argument of, well, if Connolly was involved and he knew the president was going to get killed in the motorcade, why would he get in the car right in front of him? Why would he put himself in harm's way? So I mean, I think if Connolly was involved, he would have supported the Warren Commission. He would have supported the single bullet theory, but the story he told did not. So I find it, I'm not convinced that Johnson was involved or Connolly. But Connolly was the one who pushed for the trademark, and the motorcade route depended on where he was going to give the luncheon speech.
Now, did he push for the trademark or did he push for the women's?
No. He pushed for the trademark. That Secret Service, Kennedy's Secret Service wanted Jerry Bruno wanted the women's center, and they had a big fight about it. And finally, Connolly told Jerry Bruno, he said, "Look, if the president, it's either the trademark or the president doesn't come to Dallas." Now, for Connolly to say that, because he wasn't too crazy about Kennedy coming to Texas to begin with, and for Connolly to say that, to be that firm, and it's got to be either that or he doesn't come, he's taking a chance here. If he's part of the conspiracy, why would he put that on the table? The president's not coming. You know what I mean? It doesn't make sense to me. All of this doesn't make sense to me. So if he's willing to not have the president go to Dallas, see, Kennedy was warned ahead of time that this was going to happen. Not that he was going to get killed, excuse me, but that something might happen. Something bad might happen. This is what everybody was afraid of. Something bad might happen. They might throw an egg at him or something. Something's going to be. That's how much the people disliked him. Kennedy was warned. And if you listen to what I've been listening to, some of the recordings that you put on YouTube, and if you listen to Connolly, it sounds like he's implying that it was the Kennedy group that wanted the motorcade. And so I'm thinking to myself, is this some kind of a macho type of, I'm going to show you that I'm not afraid of you type of thing? I'm going to ride through an open car right through your city. That's how I'm going to show you I'm not afraid of you. And if that's what it was a terrible miscalculation, because that's what he makes it sound like. He makes it sound like it was the Kennedy people that wanted the motorcade. And
well, he said he was delaying the trip because he was doing something for his votes, because he was running for some type of election thing.
Yeah, he was trying to set up his cabinet and stuff. Yeah,
apparently there was talks about it, about like in April or something like that is when they wanted to do it and go to Dallas. But then he said, why would you go? Kennedy wanted to, or suggested to do that in April. And he was like, why would you go there? It's the wrong time of season. People are on vacation or traveling. So why don't we delay it? But he was trying to delay it for his election so he could have full focus on this.
Then he wanted to go on Johnson's birthday in August, and Connolly said, "No, it's too hot. You're not going to get anybody to go out to the trademark. It's too hot."
Well, and again, if you believe the LBJ did it thing,
yeah. Well, this is their story, right? This is Connolly's story, and so they delayed it to November, and then they had this. They were supposed to have this a dinner for Albert Thomas. Albert Thomas was a congressman.
They did that dinner.
Yeah, they were supposed to have this dinner, but they were scheduling it for November 21st in Houston, I think it was. And so they're going to have this dinner. Albert Thomas, and that's the guy who's on the plane winking at Johnson in that photograph. Albert Thomas was supposed to be retiring from the Congress because he had found out he had cancer. But after Kennedy was killed, he didn't retire. So it makes it look like almost like this is a trap. They're setting a trap for Kennedy to come to Texas because Kennedy liked Albert Thomas. And so they had that dinner, like you said, in Houston on the night before. And I think the original plan was for him to go to Fort Worth the next day, and then he was supposed to receive some kind of honorary degree from Texas Christian University, and they canceled when Connelly was making the plans. And then Connelly found out he made the plan. Now we got to do something. What are we going to do? So they said, well, we're not giving him an honorary degree. We're not giving Kennedy an honorary degree, but if you want to use our facilities to give a speech, you can do that. And they said, well, what's the point? So then they got the Fort Worth Chamber of Commerce to give him a breakfast that morning of the 22nd. And then they made the second stop, Dallas. And then from there, he was supposed to go to the capital there. Jeez, I can't even remember the name. Austin for a dinner. And then from Austin to the LBJ Ranch. That was the whole schedule that was supposed to be. But they got Dallas and Fort Worth put in there later on because TCU said, no, we're not going to give him an honorary degree. That was supposed to take up a major part of the day. And so this was all the planning. And Connelly says that the planning was being made by his people, you know. But
Well, again, this was brought up again. Everything we're mentioning, if you're listening right now, I'm going to be showing clips on everything that was stated by Connelly in the HSCA interviews. But he even stated that, like, did you not talk to this? I think it was Samuel Devine talked to Connelly and was like, you didn't talk to the Secret Service at all about planning the routes or protection aspects. You just had Adlai Stevenson that was hit with a picket fence type thing, and then you had another situation with General Walker. You were aware of these, but you didn't bother talking to him. And he was like, "Ah," and he's like making an excuse of like, I would think that my people, I've talked to my people, and we had to work out some things. And then he talked about again what you mentioned, Jerry Bruno. He states Hal Bruno, then recovers later and tells him I made a mistake. It's actually Jerry Bruno. But a lot of people don't know about that disagreement. It's kind of like at Parkland. A lot of people don't know there was actually like two incidences. There was one with an FBI agent and a Secret Service person. Then there was an FBI agent or Secret Service person that hit a just random person going into the hospital with like the butt end of a gun or something like that. And there's a doctor that made a statement like, I knew that man's jaw was broken or something of that sort. So there's these little incidences that you hear about, and these things become like super, super glorified, or I don't know, they're never like learned about or they're written about, and then it gets remembered way later. One thing for me, which I'm gonna play a clip on from Connelly's testimony. I'm sure you've heard this. We've all heard this, but I don't think anybody can point to a source. And I've asked many people to try and find me one. The fight on at the airport when they arrived in Love Field. The argument between some say it was about Connelly sitting in their car or something of that sort. It was between LBJ and Ralph Yarborough, and nobody wanted to ride with
well,
Ralph Yarborough, I guess.
the way I heard about it was the morning of the assassination. And while they were in Fort Worth, Johnson came to Kennedy's room and they had a big argument. And the argument was that the Johnson did it people say that it was an argument to get Connelly out of Kennedy's car because they knew it was going to happen ahead of time. This is the implication. But what I read that Johnson was arguing because Ralph Yarborough didn't want to ride with him. They that's kind of like the Republicans and the Democrats now. It's like there were two factions of the Democrats in Texas, and they were fighting all the time, and they hated each other. And Ralph Yarborough was more the liberal arm of the Democrat Party, and Johnson and Connelly were the conservative. That's why Kennedy wanted Connelly to ride with him and Johnson to ride with Yarborough to show unity. You got a liberal and a conservative in each car. You know what I mean? We can get along. We can ride together. And Johnson was arguing with Kennedy, and Kennedy said, look, you tell Yarborough, and I'm not sure if he said this to Johnson or if he said it to Kenny O'Donnell, because I think Kenny O'Donnell came in with the same thing. And I think it was Kenny O'Donnell. He said, you tell Yarborough either he rides with Johnson or he walks. And that was the end of it. And after that, I think at the airport, I think it was that Yarborough was trying to get into somebody else's car or something, backup car or something. I think I heard, and they said, "No, you're riding with Johnson. You're riding with Johnson, or you're walking."
Now,
One
do
or the
you
other.
know where that comes from? Because again, I think we've all heard it that there was this fight, and a lot of people, like you you kind of hinted at a couple times, a lot of people take it as he was trying to save his friend from riding in the car that was going to be shot at. That's how you know LBJ was behind it. Again, why would he also leave Connelly's wife? That wouldn't make sense. I don't think Connelly's going to leave his wife in the car in danger if they know there's going to be shots being fired. But I heard different things, and the things that I've heard from LBJ's phone call was that there was a feud between John Connelly and Yarborough, and that LBJ goes, I was fine with Yarborough. I didn't think he was that bad of a guy. And I see photos of them handshaking. So at that point, you could think LBJ might be telling the truth. But then you hear John Connelly talking about finding out at breakfast, or he went down in the middle of the night when they arrived at the hotel. He went downstairs, ordered, and it's the weirdest order. It's milk, some eggs, and a steak. And just something like 1 o'clock in the morning that he heard about this argument that he didn't know about, a feud between Johnson and Yarborough. Again, people think that, like I was told by some people, that Kennedy went to Dallas because he was going to unite the parties. He needed a large amount of it. That's not true. Based on John Connelly's testimony, he states that if he wanted to unite the parties, which would have been just LBJ and Yarborough, would have showed unity between them by having them sit together, that whole thing, he could have done it in D.C. Their offices were like right down the hallway from each other. He could have easily fixed that split. So that became pushed out there as a thing. And again, he could have did that at any moment. I'll show clips on that where Connelly even kind of debunks that whole thing. This is kind of what I wanted to do, was kind of examine these and see where, because again, Connelly could be lying. Connelly, there's some things where Connelly's saying things where I go, that doesn't sound too right. Like you're hesitating a lot to answer, but he's very quick on a lot of his stuff. Or either, I don't know if he had it rehearsed or he even thought about that, but he's definitely was trying to protect some things. Like when it came to the Warren Commission's conclusions, he was like, I'm not against that at all. It's like, well, what you're saying about the bullet not hitting both of you at once, it's against the magic bullet theory. That would be against the whole conclusion and the narrative. And he's kind of like, I don't think it does, but whatever. And then just kind of like, let's gloss over.
Yeah, and then there's the conversation between Johnson and Richard Russell, where Richard Russell says, I listened to Connelly's testimony, and I don't believe that the same bullet hit both of them. And Johnson says, neither do I. Now, here's another clue. If Johnson is part of this, why isn't he supporting the Warren Commission? Why is he saying, I don't agree with the single bullet theory either? Why isn't he saying, gee, it's possible, say something in favor of the Warren Commission? He doesn't say that. Then he turns around and tells a newsman, an interviewer, that he believes there was a conspiracy involved. Why would he say that if he was the mastermind? See, a lot of this stuff, like you said, when you start getting into these theories and stuff that people have, a lot of it doesn't make sense. It doesn't add up. And all of these conversations that Johnson had that were recorded, like the ones you're posting on YouTube and stuff, he never implicates himself. He never gives you a clue that he's involved in this. He never says, boy, we got that son of a bitch, or anything like that. You know what I mean? He never says anything that makes the assassination sound like it was a good thing.
Yeah, but the theory or the thought against that is because he knew he was being recorded.
It could be.
For me, it's like, yeah, but why would he think it would be released? Like, they didn't think Hoover's testimony was going to be released. Yeah, I don't know if you've heard that phone call, but he's talking to, I don't know if it's Ramsey Clark or it's Meyer or something, but they're talking about Jerry O'Leary, who was like an FBI plant in the newspaper for the Washington Star. Hoover was feeding him things. Hoover was mad that they were trying to get his testimony. The Warren Commission wanted to interview him or talk to him and get his testimony. He didn't want to do that because he thought his report was enough and that they should just go by the report, which was the overall conclusion, has got to wrap back to that Warren Commission report. But they did interview him. And then I think it's Ramsey Clark is talking, or Meyer something, is talking to LBJ. I can play that phone call. And he goes, we think that Hoover leaked his own testimony. Like, they gave it to Jerry O'Leary, and there's no way he could have got it on his own, and we think Hoover did that. I go, what would be more occasional of Hoover? To leak his own testimony because you pissed him off so bad for making him give testimony in the first place. So it's that makes a lot of sense. But again, this is one of those things where it's very confusing on trying to understand, because again, there's a lot of theories, and that's why I wanted to talk to you about a lot of this stuff in Connelly's testimony. I'm going to play some of it here soon. But did you ever find it strange that, like, again, with the climate of Dallas, it was well known. I think Kennedy was warned by a couple of people. I think we both probably heard that he was entering like the snake pit or something of that sort. I've seen some statements where that was said and things of that, but Connelly kind of not being aware or acting like he didn't know that there was this harmful climate of Dallas. Even Nellie Connelly stating that we wanted Dallas to be on their best behavior with a warm welcome. And he's like, we only saw one sign that was like a negative sign against Kennedy. It just said, Kennedy, go home. But it was like all of other parts of Dallas, they were fighting other people that were less popular than the president. I'm
Yeah.
just curious why you wouldn't look.
At Love Field, there was a sign that said, "Help JFK stamp out democracy." There were a lot of anti-Kennedy signs. There were posters all posted all along the parade route that wanted for treason with him with the mugshots. I mean, in the morning Dallas Morning News, they had a full page ad. They didn't call him even President Kennedy. They didn't recognize him as president. They put down, "Welcome to Dallas, Mr. Kennedy." That was the title. They didn't even call him President Kennedy. They thought he was a joke as a president. And there was a lot of animosity towards. And you know what? And talk about that, Dallas as the city I hate. When they finally arrested Oswald, they wanted to kill Oswald. They weren't just happy with killing Kennedy. Now the other half of Dallas wanted to kill Oswald. So I mean, it was a terrible atmosphere. Nellie Connelly had turned to the president just before they turned onto Elm Street, and she said, "You can't say that Dallas doesn't love you now." And Ralph Yarborough said all the people on the street were friendly and stuff. He says, but he looked up into the buildings, and in the buildings there were people looking down with scorn that they didn't like. They were afraid they were going to throw a flower pot or something into the limousine from those buildings. But the people up in the buildings were not happy. And even John Connelly, when he first got shot, what did he yell out? "My God, they're going to kill us all." He knew that the atmosphere there was dangerous.
Did you ever think it was weird that he openly stated, talking about that quote that you just said, like he didn't bother it being just something that everyone in the car kind of heard? And it's funny because what's eerie about that is it's right before they turned on Elm Street to pass the Texas School Book Depositories when Nellie Connelly stated, "You can't say Dallas doesn't love you." And it's then obviously the shots
Kennedy
get rung
says
out.
something, responds something like, "Well, that's obvious," or something like that. And then they turn on to Elm Street, and next thing you know, boom, right into a crossfire.
Another thing that's kind of popped up I wanted to kind of mention was that why wasn't Kennedy wearing a bubble top? And like everyone's like, it's a beautiful day, or people said that Kennedy didn't want the bubble top on because he wanted people to be able to approach the car because of his thing. What are your thoughts on that? Do you think, because some people also think that the bubble top was taken off for a purpose of the assassination being effective or the assassination being able to play out? So I wanted to get your thoughts on it first before.
Well,
Like,
I think Kenny O'Donnell was the one that told them to keep the bubble top off the car, unless it was raining. Unless it was raining, keep the bubble top off the car, and it had stopped raining. So that's the reason why it wasn't on. But again, we get back to the thing of the Kennedy people wanting the motorcade through Dallas. If I'm the security guy, I gotta argue against this. Riding through that city in an open car. No, helicopter in, get them on a helicopter and take them to the Trade Mart by helicopter. No motorcade, not through Dallas. It's too dangerous. It was too dangerous.
I bring that up because when they talk about this, there is a quote from John Connolly that would side more with the Kennedy and wanting the crowd to see him and putting on kind of like this look of, I don't know, just spectacularness that people wanted to see. There's a couple accounts. One is that a little girl was holding a sign saying, "Will you shake hands with me, Mr. Kennedy or Mr. President?" And then JFK stopped the car in the middle of the motorcade and got out and shook hands with the child. And there's a bunch of kind of incidences like that
Yeah, and I
where
think
Connolly brings up.
there were some people along the motorcade route that were from Massachusetts, and they said, hold up a sign said, "We're from Mass. Please stop and shake our hands." And he had the car stop. And then there was another group that he stopped for was a group of Catholic nuns, because he was a Catholic. He saw the nuns and he had them stop.
Um,
Uh,
I bring that up, like I said, again, because there's a story John Connolly says in his testimony where he talks about that there was an incident in the motorcade car, like an argument, and it was about Jackie and her sunglasses. She originally had her sunglasses on because the sun was very bright, and JFK asked her to take her sunglasses off, or stated, "Take your sunglasses off, Jackie." And this is now Nellie and John testifying together. and they're both kind of finishing each other's sentences. So I'd like to think that that's pretty accurate, that they didn't just rehearse those types of things. But he said it like 3 or 4 times. Take your glasses off, Jackie. Kind of brings a little bit of tension, but also agrees with the aspect of the publicity aspect, the photos, the engaging crowd to people. We know RFK, he was very involved in shaking hands in crowds. I mean, I think
Yeah, and it's all about image. You know what I mean? You're not a movie star. Don't act like with the sunglasses. Let them see your face. Let them see your eyes. Take the glasses off. Let people see you. It's all about image.
So do you choose that over the aspect of it being kind of strategic that they had the bubble top come off just for? Because if you know Dallas is dangerous, why wouldn't you have the damn top on the car? Even if it's not bulletproof, it would deter a shooter for sure.
Yeah, well, you never know because it could create some kind of glare that might blind him or something, screw up his aim. Yeah, but who knows? I think they didn't want it on the Cobb if it wasn't raining. That's first of all, I wouldn't even have him in an open car through that city. I wouldn't have done it. I mean, that's ridiculous from a security standpoint. That's ridiculous.
Why that is kind of like one of those things where it's kind of like, I don't know. I just feel like a bubble top would have been more important, but I'm going to try and share some of these clips here. I try to go back to everything that we've kind of mentioned already and be able to pull these up. So if I'm probably missed 1 or 2 things, I'll go back and do this. But one of the first things I'm going to play is the Jesse Curry telling the city of Dallas that they need to be on their best behavior for when the president arrives. I think this is the one.
Because of the unfortunate incident which occurred here during the visit of Ambassador Stevenson, people everywhere in the world will be hypercritical of our behavior. Nothing must occur that is disrespectful or degrading to the President of the United States. He is entitled to the highest respect of all of our citizens. And the law enforcement agencies in this area are going to do everything within their power to ensure that no untoward accident or incident occurs. We will take immediate action if any suspicious conduct is observed, and we also urge all good citizens to be alert for such conduct.
Okay, so Curry knew what was going on, but apparently John Connelly, the fucking governor, had no clue that there was such a issue with the motorcade route or anything like that. Okay, so we'll get into. Let's see if I can try and do this the right way here. Sorry, I got like 50 things pulled up. All right, so let's get into the climate of Dallas. This is from John Connelly's HSCA testimony.
What I understand your earlier description of the climate in the state of Texas and in the nation, to apply to this period of time, too. I know you described that was basically the way you perceived it when the hints first came to your attention in 1962. I take it they hadn't changed much by 1963. Is that correct?
No, they had not. I think the president was concerned about the campaign of 1964. His popularity is, your chief counsel, Blakely, just said it dropped from 83% down to about 60%. It was on a descending scale during this period of time. And I don't remember the precise figures that the polls showed, but obviously he had lost considerable ground, and he was concerned about it.
And then we got what you stated about LBJ's birthday being suggested. This is about how about choosing August for Kennedy's trip, not April. I said April earlier.
Mr. President, when do you want to come? Well, then he said, I think we ought to have 4 or 5 fundraising dinners. And he said, what do you think about having it on Lyndon's birthday, August the 27th? This was in June, as I recall. And again, I said, well, Mr. President, I'd like to think about that. I said, obviously the Vice President's birthday is always a time for celebration, but I said, August is the worst month of the year to have a fundraising affair in Texas for anybody. I said, too many people are gone. It's the dog days. It's the hottest month of the year. People are on vacations. They're not interested in politics. We can't get the support, and I think it'd be a serious mistake to come in August. Let me do some thinking, and we'll be back in touch with you, and I'll suggest a format of a trip. that I think will achieve the purposes that that you want to achieve.
Now, he said that, and there was a meeting at the El Paso Hotel. I guess there was a bunch of people involved in planning the whole Texas thing and the trip and everything like that. But there was something I found really interesting. Everyone knows that LBJ and Connelly are like really good friends. I mean, you can see Christmas videos of them together at Christmas and many photos of LBJ and Connelly together, way more than there would be with JFK and Connelly. But there was a meeting with Kennedy that John Connelly had, and LBJ got really mad about the meeting because he wasn't there.
He and I were in the Oval Office, and he couldn't have been nicer, couldn't have been more friendly. I walked in, he got up from behind his desk, came around, and was extremely warm and cordial, as he always was. He sat in his rocking chair, and I sat on one of those little couches there in the Oval Room, and I frankly was a bit surprised that the Vice President wasn't there. But he wasn't, and I later heard about it. Because after my visit with the president, I went out that evening to the Elms, to the vice president's home, and he was considerably irritated with me, and he said so. And he said, "I suppose you think I don't have any interest in what's happening in Texas." And I said, "No, Mr. Vice President, I know you're extremely interested in what's happening in Texas." He said, "Well, why didn't you tell me?" I said, Mr. Vice President, I assumed you knew I was going to see the president." And he said, and I said, trying to alibi the way I could, because I recognized that he was really irritated about it. And I said, "After all, I made this appointment several days ago," and I said, "It's not my prerogative to say who's in that Oval Office." And I said, "I assumed if the president wanted you there, you'd be there."
Now, I'm sure that pissed LBJ off, but I don't think there was a whole lot of nefariousness behind that being a situation where there was a plan to get Kennedy or do something, or there was something that I just felt like LBJ thought he was getting left out, which I'm sure happened a lot with JFK. I mean, it's hard to have LBJ in the room because he kind of is his own bull in a china shop, if that makes any sense. I mean, what are your thoughts on the clips I just played, Gil?
Yeah.
Sound like he's lying, or is he right?
Johnson was probably just jealous he wasn't involved.
And this clip right here is about the whole reason for Kennedy coming to Dallas. A lot of people think it was fixing the split in the Democratic Party. Again, I don't know. This is just John Connelly's words. It's not really my opinion or anything.
Two individuals who were most involved in the split in the party were Senator Yarborough and Vice President Johnson. And both of them were in Washington, D.C. And this is where the trouble was. The trouble arose basically over federal patronage and federal appointees. And Vice President Johnson was trying to get every federal appointment he could get, and so was Senator Yarborough. Senator Yarborough was complaining constantly to the White House, to President Kennedy, that Johnson was usurping his patronage rights of the Senate with respect to federal judges, marshals, and so forth. This was the battle here. And indeed, if the president was interested in resolving that difficulty, he had Vice President Johnson right across the street in the old executive office building. He had Senator Yarborough right here on the Hill, and he could have gotten them together in 10 minutes. But that wasn't the purpose of his trip to Texas at all. Had nothing to do with it. In the first place, he couldn't settle the differences within the Democratic Party. They hadn't been settled yet. Senator Yarborough, Senator Ralph Yarborough, was then in the Senate, and he was being constantly harangued by his supporters in Texas. They were saying that, well, they're structuring this thing, they're trying to keep us away from the president, and the president's supporters are not getting to see him, and Senator Yarborough was relaying those to the White House and to the advanced people, and we were arguing about tickets, and we were arguing about everything in the world. It got to be a major hassle, and part of this raised the question that has since been discussed in great length. If the president came to Texas to resolve the differences in the Democratic Party in Texas, nothing could be further from the truth. The two individuals who were most involved in the split in the party were Senator Yarborough and Vice President Johnson.
Now, before I play the LBJ phone calls where Johnson says something a little bit differently, I want to state that when he's talking about like coming to Dallas, Kennedy stated that he wanted to go there for 4 or 5 fundraising trips. If you listen to Connelly's testimony, it makes it sound like that's all JFK cares about going to Dallas for. I don't believe that to be true. I believe it was just something that was added on because why not? It's hit 2 birds with 1 stone. If you're down there, go raise some money for your election campaign. But I believe it's because Dallas was the one place Kennedy hadn't visited, and out of all the other places that he has gone to, and I think they needed to go to Dallas because they needed to show that they did care about Dallas too, because Dallas was a large percentage of the vote. I mean, having LBJ on the ticket is one thing. It is supportive, and Connelly on your side is one thing as well too, but you needed to go there and make a presence to show them that you do care about them too. Not saying JFK didn't, but I think that was a lot of the reason why there was such this push that this had to happen. The whole Dallas trip had to happen.
Yeah, I think he went to Dallas because he wanted to talk to them about the extremists and not to listen to the extremists. That was part of his speech at the Trade Mart. When you look at the speech at the Trade Mart, he's asking the people of Dallas not to listen to the extremists on the right and use a little more common sense. You know, these people thought that he was going to turn the country over to the communists. That's what they thought. They thought he was going to turn the country over to the Khrushchev and the Russians.
I'm going to play this one. This one was about John Connelly finding out about the feud that was going on, or the argument at Love Field. And then I'm going to play the LBJ phone call about the argument at Love Field. And we'll kind of look at these 2 different sides of the story.
Which was long-standing between Senator Yarborough and first Senator Johnson, and then continuing into Vice President Johnson. Did that particular dispute come up at all?
Yes. Oh, it was ever with us. It came up. I didn't know it. Everything had gone beautifully. We got into Fort Worth about 11 o'clock at night at Carswell Air Force Base and drove into town in the light drizzle. And the President, Ms. Kennedy, and Vice President, Ms. Johnson went up to their suites. I went down to the Texas Hotel coffee shop to have some bacon and eggs and a glass of milk about midnight. And that was the first, then I heard that they'd had quite a hassle in Houston, that Senator Yarborough had refused to ride in the car with Vice President Johnson.
Okay, I think it's this next clip.
In the horn room of the Texas Hotel and sat down, and he motioned for me to come over, and I went over there, and he said, "John, did you know Yarborough refused to ride with Lyndon yesterday?" I said, "Yes, sir, I heard that last night." And he said, "By God, he'll ride with him today or he'll walk." And I said, "Okay." And I did nothing about it. But he apparently, then later I saw him talking to Senator Yarborough, and indeed that day Senator Yarborough rode in the car with Vice President Johnson in the Dallas motorcade. So but you know, this is one of those things that's really in the overall planning and the execution of this trip was of no great consequence.
So that was the only part of what we might call the Yarborough-Johnson feud that was even taken up by the president on the trip. Is that correct?
Right.
So I'm going to play the argument from the LBJ phone call. It's LBJ and Frank Irwin. It's on February 1st of 1964. And this is kind of LBJ talking about the argument.
And how can I ever explain to a man that I'm for shivers against a fellow that's always voted for me and voting for me every day now, 100% of the time, on every measure I've got. And just because we got little peaks, little boy blue personalities, get mad about something. Hell, I didn't like for him to say he wouldn't ride with me. But hell, John and Nellie had said they wouldn't ride with him, and they wouldn't ride in the same car with him, so I guess he got mad too. Of course, both of them, I laughed. I thought it was little boy stuff, and both of them wound up together riding at each other. Nellie was in the car. We just talked big, but when the nut cutting was down, well, we got in the car and bowed nice. I didn't think it hurt me a damn bit to ride with Yarborough. And I thought that both Nellie and Yarborough both had to come a good deal to get in the car after they'd said what they did.
Because a lot of this seemed, again, we hear kind of a different thing from Johnson there. Connelly saying that there's this feud between Johnson and Yarborough. Johnson is not aware of the feud. Hold on. He's kind of sitting there like, I didn't mind riding with Yarborough. And that's, again, that's something where we kind of hear, I don't know how this turned over to it being about getting just John in the car. Maybe because Yarborough wanted to swap seats, but yeah, Nellie didn't like Yarborough either. It seemed like there was a kind of a whole mixture that weren't really appreciating Yarborough. So, I mean, what are your thoughts on that? Because obviously that's one of those long-standing things that we hear in the assassination that can kind of, not say that haven't gotten disclosed, but has been a giant thing of what I see in comments from people saying that there was an argument at Love Field because LBJ didn't want his best friend in the car when the motorcade is going through Dallas to get shot at. And it's like, yeah, well, is he going to forget it, his best friend's wife? Like, that's not going to happen. Like, he liked Nellie as well, too. So what are your thoughts on this? Do you think that they're right that it was just Yarborough just was refusing to ride with Johnson, and Johnson was probably picking on Yarborough like he does? I mean, he was a bit of a bully.
Yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense that Yarborough didn't want to ride with him. Because if he did it in Houston, there's a chance he did it the same thing in Dallas. You know, if he refused to ride with him in Houston, then he probably refused to ride with him in Dallas.
How did you know about the Jerry Bruno thing? Was that from my clips, or were you well aware of that beforehand?
No, I forget where I read it. It was in a book. I forget which book it was. I've read so many books. I can't remember where it was. I know it's. I've got it on my timeline. I've got a timeline that I wrote, but I didn't put the source down. That Bruno had a problem with the Connelly people over. It was Yarborough's people wanted the women's center, and Connelly's people wanted the Trade Mart. And Bruno looked at both of them. He looked at both locations. He said that the Trade Mart was not securable compared to the women's center. The women's center had less exits and entrances, and the Trade Mart had places up in the rafters where a gunman could hide and shoot the president while he was giving the speech. And the Secret Service didn't like it. They didn't like the Trade Mart. But that's what they ended up. Finally, the White House said, I think it was O'Donnell said, give them the Trade Mart. If that, if it's that much, they're that, let them have the Trade Mart. They gave in. And that was a big mistake.
What about the publication of the route? Obviously, this is something I kind of first learned when we first learned about the assassination, that the route was published in the newspapers. And I think it's not necessarily defined to, I know it says November 21st, but I've heard November 17th it was published in there. We knew Oswald got a job at the book depository on October 15th in 1963. So that was before the route was even published, or the change in the route was even measured in there. Apparently, they had multiple routes that were published in multiple papers, and one paper that published was the route that they ended up using. I don't know if there was a last minute change. Maybe you could talk about the publication of the route or what you know about it.
My impression is that the Dallas Morning News published the route on either Tuesday or Wednesday of the week of the assassination. They published the wrong route. The Dallas Herald, the evening paper, the Dallas Herald, published the correct route that same night. And then the following morning, the Dallas Morning News published the correct paper route that the Herald had published the night before. So the Morning News actually published two different routes, but the first one was wrong. People would say, oh, they changed the route. See, this was supposed to be the route to begin with, and then they changed it. That's not true. What happened was the Dallas Morning News published the wrong route. And I said something like, they didn't mention Elm Street. It went like Houston Street to the Stemmons Freeway. It didn't even mention the Elm Street turn. And but the Dallas Herald got it right that evening in their edition, and then the Dallas Morning News got it right the following morning. I think it was first published on Tuesday, and then they got it corrected on Wednesday.
Now, the route went by the book depository. It added that little bit, that kind of extra little bit, just to get Kennedy in front of the crowd a little bit more. If he would have went to the women's building, it probably wouldn't have used Dealey Plaza. It probably would have just taken the Stemmons Freeway all the way to where they needed to go. I think Connelly testified to that. The change in the route to go by the Texas School Book Depository. Would Oswald have advanced knowledge on that if it was published? When did you think it was published? Like the day of, when they were traveling, it was the right route published, so maybe he caught the right newspaper out of the ones that published maybe other routes?
No, I think the wrong route was published on Tuesday, and then the right one was published on Wednesday.
So he's killed on a Friday, so he had 2 days. Okay. Do you think it would have been possible to even, like, you can't do it yourself if you're Oswald. You cannot maneuver the book or the route to be changed to go right past your work. Like, that's just not something, I don't think, unless he has a crystal ball, to be able to have foreknowledge of that. So do you think that was a conspiratorial thing to get him to go by the Texas School Book Depository? Because we know that Oswald was on a list of those types of people that have like a weird background that Curry had, that usually the FBI alerts them to certain people with subversive backgrounds. We know that Oswald was on that list, where he was taken off a couple weeks before the Dallas trip. So do you think there was any type of manipulation or thing like that, or do you think it had really nothing to do with the Texas School Book Depository at all?
No, I don't believe that the motorcade route was changed. I don't believe that the motorcade route was ever changed. I think they just published the wrong route on Tuesday. Now, where they got that route from, I don't know, but apparently it was the wrong one. Then they corrected it, and the reason why I say that is because the other newspaper published the correct one that same day, that same evening. So the morning edition has to be wrong. It wasn't that it was changed. It was that they published the wrong route. So that then the evening paper published the correct route on Tuesday, and then the morning paper picked up on it and published the correct route on Wednesday morning. The route was never changed. The motorcade route was never changed. It was just the wrong route was published.
Okay, I'm gonna try and play here some of the clips about the motorcade route, because and one of the things you also mentioned too about the disagreement between Connelly's men and Kennedy's men on the motorcade route as well.
Occur where there were disagreements as to at least the emphasis that should be placed on various aspects.
Very few of them with me. I was meeting intermittently with these 8 or 9 people that I had working on this trip, but
who were your people meeting with?
They were meeting with Hal Bruno, the President's advance man. We were getting information from all kind of sources. We were getting direct calls from the top labor leaders in the state and others. We were getting a considerable feedback and frankly a considerable differences developed between the President's advance men and the people I had working on the trip, and to the point where it got a bit testy.
What does a bit testy mean? That's what I want to know. This is Samuel Devine. I mentioned this earlier.
Aware of the incidents that had occurred to Ambassador Stevenson, as well as General Walker.
Yes, sir.
And these were matters of concern to you, but you still had no anticipation that anything of violence might occur. Is that
no,
correct?
sir. And my objection to the motorcade really was not based on any apprehension of violence, Congressman Devine, at all. It was, as I've testified, merely in order to try to save the President the wear and tear of a motorcade. And
at any juncture during the planning and scheduling, did you specifically discuss with the Secret Service what possible harm might come to the President, and if so, from what source? You or your people?
Congressman, I don't think so. I don't know. Some of our people might have raised that point with the Secret Service, but I doubt it, because in none of our discussions or planning sessions did we dwell on that subject or make any point of it.
That's where I think he's lying. If you really think about the threats that were going on in Dallas and you're not paying attention to that, but you're more concerned about Kennedy's wear and tear going on in a motorcade and how exhausting that can be, That just seems backwards to me. I think he was more obsessed with his election stuff that was going on, and he was still thinking about his image way after the fact, and he didn't bother about it. Now he's just making an excuse for why he didn't even, because there are two countering points. If you care about the man, why don't you warn him when he's about to get shot, or if there's going to be some violence towards him, but you're concerned about him being tired, or you just don't feel like sitting in a car with him the whole time.
Yeah, it's funny. It's ridiculous. You know, it's ridiculous. It's like the police chief when he warns the citizens of Dallas in that video that you showed earlier. He turns around and says, "If you see somebody about to do something to the president, you're to run to the nearest police officer and let him know." Right? These cops are stationed along the motorcade route, so many feet apart from each other. They could be 2 blocks away, but if you're a citizen, don't take the matters into your own hands. Go and get a cop, find a cop somewhere and tell them, hey, somebody's about to throw something at the president. I mean, it's ridiculous the way they set up this security. You know, Connelly didn't care about Kennedy's security. He had other people handling it, because if he had any concerns or he had any, he would have been on top of this. But by his own admission, he wasn't involved in this. It was other people that were involved in it, because he delegated it to somebody else. He didn't want any part of it.
Do you think that was laziness, or do you think that he just didn't care about Kennedy?
I think he just didn't care.
Okay.
Like I said, he didn't want him to come to Texas to begin with. And when they finally met in the Cortez Hotel there in El Paso, Johnson told Kennedy, he said, "Well, you got the governor here, ask him now."
This is about the publication of the route.
Not only said we're going to have a motorcade, but we're going to publish the route of it. And I said, well, that's crazy. And I said, because here again, but I was thinking only in terms of pickets or embarrassing signs or things of that sort. Yeah. But indeed they did. They ran a map of the parade route 3 or 4 days. I think it was Tuesday before the Friday in the Dallas papers. Full route of the motorcade.
Did the newspaper publish the exact route of the motorcade?
I think it did. They might have altered the route a bit from that published map, but I think it was the precise map of the motorcade.
And that was published in sufficient time for someone with perhaps sinister motive to have placed themselves in the book depository or elsewhere.
I think it was published on Tuesday, and of course the event occurred on Friday, so they had that much time.
And then this one was the route wasn't finished till the last few days.
First appeared that November 21st and 22nd had been chosen as the dates of the president's visit.
So he would have known he was coming to Dallas, perhaps even earlier than his appointment day. But he would not have known the parade route until Tuesday.
I don't think he could have, Congressman Pryor, because up until the very last, frankly, of that week, we were still arguing about it. We were still arguing, one, whether or not there'd be a motorcade at all. Two, if there was a motorcade, whether or not the route of the motorcade would be published. And frankly, those who were proponents of the motorcade and of the route wanted to get the maximum public exposure for the president, and that was the basic reason for the motorcade. But that issue was not settled until that week, the week of the visit. So
I want to get your opinion on this, Gil, because I think we've talked about it before, and you've kind of come at it from more of a law enforcement perspective background. When we talked about the Dallas police and how a proper investigation should have gone, we've done that in previous episodes. Your view on Connelly. Is he involved? Is he not involved? He can be involved in the cover-up. That's a different question. This is specifically about wanting the president out of office, killing him, doing that whole type of thing that everyone starts saying this was an orchestrated thing. Connelly was in on it. Your opinion from what you've heard of Connelly and what you know already, where do you stand?
Well, see, a lot of times when I hate to bring it in at this time, but when the CIA does something, everything is compartmentalized. What I mean by that is everybody only knows their own role. They don't know the whole story. And maybe in this instance, Connelly only knows his role is to make sure he gets that trademark. He doesn't know anything about the motorcade route or anything else. Now he's saying the motorcade route wasn't decided until late that week, just before the. That's not true. That motorcade route was finalized when at the minute they picked the trademark, and that was on the 14th. That was the Friday before the assassination. They took I think it was the 14th or 15th. They decided on the trademark. Then they announced that's what the luncheon was going to be. That was done at the last minute. So the anti-conspiracy people say, well, then they only have a week to figure out how to shoot the president along the motorcade route. You know what I mean? If there's a conspiracy involved, they've only got a week to do that. How do they do that? Well, I mean, if you got people who are professional killers and professional riflemen, it doesn't matter where they fire from. It doesn't matter because they know they know how to hit a moving target. You know, and Oswald never fired at a moving target. That's another thing. So, I mean, and then he turns around and asks a co-worker that morning, why are all these people lining up out here? Sees the people lining up, and the guy says, well, this is where the president's supposed to come. I think it was James Jarman. He says, this is the route the president's going to come. He says, well, which way is he coming? So he's probably going to come down Main Street, along Houston, and down Elm. And he says, imagine that. And he walked away. So Oswald didn't know the parade route, or he wouldn't have asked a co-worker, you know. But the Warren Commission supporters say, that's the genius of Oswald. You know, he's just throwing everybody off. I mean,
I would raise more suspicions towards you if you did.
Yeah, I mean, here's a guy who's such a genius that he leaves the rifle there and flees. I mean, you know, how much of a genius is he? He's thinking up an excuse.
I wonder this because obviously Marina has testified that there was a conversations a couple of days before the president was going to arrive that they were talking about JFK coming to Dallas. So I'm sure Oswald was aware that JFK was coming to Dallas, but I don't know if he knew about the route or if it was going to come by his work. Also a point, maybe he knew, but he was asking people, what's going on over there? Just to gauge their excitement level to see if he could slip in a comment, something political that would engage into a conversation about politics or some type of thing. I don't know. I know he didn't talk much, but again, you hear backwards versions of Oswald. He's apparently informed on talking about politics. And then he doesn't talk about politics ever. So it's a kind of a mixed bag of things, but it's just really suspicious to use that as incriminating evidence of like, oh, he's trying not to draw attention to himself. Well, he would just go up to the 6th floor and then do that without anybody seeing him or talking to anybody. He wouldn't stop and talk to people and ask what they're looking at. That just would raise more suspicions to him. People are going to get stopped by police, interviewed by them. And he's going to be like, well, this guy asked me what was going on. It's like, how do you not know the president's coming to town?
I don't know. I don't know.
So if you were in Connelly's seat, how would you handle this as, like I said, we just kind of talked about, do you think Connelly was involved or not? If you just think he was kind of a unknowing participant, or if someone that was kind of just left to get the trademark, that's your only mission, that's all you have to do, and then everything kind of just unfolded and everyone else was in, which is a good perspective to have for sure. I've just come across a lot of people that are just so sure Connelly was this, and I was like, I'm 50-50. I'm just looking at what I've heard and what sounds more believable and realistic. I think a lot of this can be confusion. A lot of this can just be a bunch of stuff going on that we just aren't aware of. And some of the things that have been said out there that were some of the first things I ever learned about the JFK assassination, where I just never questioned where it came from. And now I'm kind of doing that now. What would you do if you were in Connelly's spot? You're kind of in charge of planning the motorcade route. You would obviously look at threats, issues going on in Dallas, but you would also look at safe advantage points. I mean, it was brought up multiple times. If you were going to take this route, why didn't you worry about protection of the president, covering rooftops and buildings and things of this sort? This was all things I think a lot of the conspiracy people bring up all the time when it comes to the protection of the president.
Yeah, I think I would have flown him in to Dallas. I would have had a helicopter at Love Field, and I would have flown him into Dallas. I wouldn't have allowed him the motorcade route. That's why I don't understand how the Secret Service could even approve that. There had to be something more to it. Who authorized this motorcade? Who was the one that fought for this motorcade? I mean, it's ridiculous. It's like, okay, here he is. Go ahead and shoot him. Take it. Shooting the president's easy. All you got to do is just remove his protection and let the nuts have at him. And then, hey, they're crazy people out there. What are you going to do?
Like we were mentioning in the beginning about different theories, another one that kind of goes in the direction of what you're kind of saying when it comes to the protection being pulled off of him. A lot of people start going into the Secret Service stuff at this moment. They start going, whether it's the Hickey and the rifle, but a lot of people saw this video that started trending, which was the driver turning around with a gun and shooting JFK in the head. That is AI video. I don't know how else to tell people that the Zapruder film is a film. It goes up and down as it rolls. So if it's continuous, it's the up and down part. This looked like it was shot from like a regular camera, which is the problem, is that it was so smooth. It's not film. You don't see the reel going. That's why it was an AI add-on. So I'm coming across people saying, I've seen the video. You can't tell me any differently. I was like that would just disappear and it wouldn't be headlining news. It's 60 years ago. They're not going to try and cover that up if that gets released. And we had a Cliff Carter tape and stuff come out that I think we've talked about last time. That was interesting. But again, what's mentioned here is that the Secret Service complicity was William Greer stopping the car twice to turn around and look at the president. And I think even Connelly states something about Roy Kellerman stating something that was going on in the car as he was blanking in and out of consciousness on the way to Parkland Hospital. But I'm going to play something that I haven't played yet that we had mentioned in the episode about They're Going to Kill Us All, and then also talking about the Trade Mart as the destination spot. So this is They're Going to Kill Us All, statement of John Connelly from the HSCA testimony.
I said first, just almost in despair, I said, no, 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 no. Just thinking how tragic it was that we'd gone through this 24 hours that had all been so wonderful and so beautifully executed. The president had been so marvelously received, and then here at the last moment, this great tragedy. And I just said, no, 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 no. And then I said, right after I was hit, I said, my God, they're going to kill us all. The shots came, in my judgment, the two shots I heard came from the same direction, back over my right shoulder, came from behind us. I don't think any shots came from any other direction.
Now, Connelly and Nellie were pretty sure that they were rifle shots, like immediately. Now, Nellie stated she had some experience with guns, but not enough to be able to distinguish a lot of things, but she agrees with her husband on the rifle shots. John was just 100% certain that it was rifle shots. He knew immediately. And you see that in the Zapruder film. You see him turn around and Kennedy grab his throat or reach up at his throat. And then there's looks like another shot, because then you see Connelly react as he's turning back. So as he's turning back to look forward and you look over his other shoulder is when he's hit, and you hear him wince and see his facial expression. And then there's the third shot, which is the headshot. But around the second shot, in between the third shot, that little break, there's where you see Nellie reaching for John and bringing him down. This was something I thought was interesting. I didn't know, which was in their testimony. They stated that there had been many stories that were released about what happened, that John just slumped to the floor or something of that was released in papers and different news stories, which again can lead to different people's opinions on the assassination when they're learning about it later on. There wasn't enough room for them to slump like that. Apparently it was just Nellie grabbing her husband, pulling him down, and then getting on top of him, kind of shielding him. And then they both kind of stayed a crazy recollection of hearing Jackie say, "Oh my God, they killed my husband," as they're driving away from Dealey Plaza, which is just heartbreaking. But have you ever heard any different theories about what went on in the motor car after the shots rang out?
No, but the theory on the driver shooting him, that started some years ago by a man named William Cooper. Cooper was a kind of a wacko, if you will, and he showed it with a bleached out version of the Zapruder film, and his version of the Zapruder film made it look like the driver had turned around and with his left hand shot over his right shoulder and hit the president. None of the witnesses saw this, okay? None of the witnesses on the overpass that saw the hole inside of the car ever reported seeing this. None of the witnesses on the street ever reported seeing this. The Zapruder film, in the enhanced Zapruder film, does not show this. It shows the top of Kellerman's head. That's what it is. It's the glare off the top of Kellerman's head that looks like a gun. In the bleached out version, it looks like it's a gun, but it's not. And they're still arguing about this over on the education forum, whether or not the driver shot Kennedy.
Well, I've heard someone state that it was Jackie was jumping on the back of the car because she saw it and she was trying to run away from the Secret Service driver who shot Kennedy, and Clint Hill was pushing her back into the car. And I was like, that's not what she was doing at all. I think the majority accepts the fact that she was reaching for brain tissue on the back of the trunk. I've only heard one other thing besides that, and that was Malcolm Kilduff stating that she was reaching back for Clint Hill, because Malcolm Kilduff has spoken to Clint Hill, and that's what Clint Hill believed at the time, was that he was reaching back to her, because Clint Hill was Jackie's Secret Service agent. So that's plausible too. The whole running from a person with a gun in front, that wouldn't make sense, because you had other people that were in the car that should have also been running at the same time.
Yeah, and one thing Greer did lie, is that he looked back twice. When he testified, he never said he looked back twice. He looked back the first time he saw Kennedy had been hit. That's when he slowed the car down. And once he slowed the car down and Kennedy got hit in the head, then he saw that there was a headshot. Then he took off. He made it sound like he heard the shot. He looked like a gunfire. It sounded like a firecracker. He turned around and looked. And when he turned back, he stepped on the gas and got out of there as fast as he could. That's not what happened. He looked twice, and he slowed the car down. And that's obvious from the Zapruder film. So like I said, the thing is, if they want to make it successful, they want to make this hit successful, all they got to do is just take his protection away, remove the motorcycles that the Dallas cops had put on the side of the limousine, move them back, get them out of the range of fire, out of the line of fire, get the general out of the front seat so he doesn't get hit by mistake, all right? And when the shooting starts, the driver slows the car down to make it easier to hit the target. That's all you got to do. The same thing they did in Butler, Pennsylvania with Trump. They had this guy under surveillance for an hour and a half, and they're saying, gee, there's a guy up there on the roof with a rifle. I wonder if he's a cop. Maybe he's a local cop. I mean, how long does it take you to get up there and get this guy? And the Secret Service, their policy is not to fire at anybody until they fire first. So I mean, they could already hit the president. And then the question is, if they had a guy in Butler, Pennsylvania that they were suspicious about, why did they let the president go out on the stage? Why didn't they hold him back? Why didn't they say, we got a problem here security-wise, we're going to straighten it out before we let you go out there? I mean, it's just ridiculous. It's just ridiculous. And then the cops are not all on the same frequency. Why not? Why aren't the cops in the Secret Service on the same frequency? How can they communicate with each other? I mean, it's ridiculous. It really is. Somebody should have been fired over that. And I don't mean just the director of the Secret Service. But anyways, okay.
But I want to bring it back to something you mentioned about with the whole Secret Service aspect of things, with Greer stopping and looking back twice. When Rowley was interviewed by the HSCA and they were asking him, or the Warren Commission even was bringing up certain things, I think the only thing they really mentioned was the drinking and why nobody was fired. And James Rowley stated something like, I didn't want the reputations of them, to be tarnished, and their families' reputations to be tarnished by something like this. It's just a mistake or something like that. But in the HSCA testimony, he is literally stating that he thought the reaction time of his Secret Service agents were good, not bad at all. And he states, you can see in the Zapruder film, Clint Hill reacted very quickly and got onto the back of the car. And then he also states that, I don't know if the Zapruder film shows this, but there were two other agents in the follow-up car or something like that the doors were swinging open like they were going to get out and run. And I'm like, what you're really basing it off of to really be proven is that you have one agent that reacted quickly. Clint Hill did his job. The other ones did not. And we have many interviews of these Secret Service agents and their testimony stating that they're observing the crowd, like they're the Terminator looking for John Connor. Like they're really examining every single aspect, and they're able to stop a little kid running up to the motorcade, like hop on them like a SWAT team, but they're not able to react when shots are being fired, and they're looking all over, not knowing what's going on for 3 shots to be let off. And again, that is a short amount of time those shots were fired off, so I understand the reaction time. But again, we don't really see a whole lot of movement when it's like everyone's kind of stuck or delayed a little bit. So,
a shot? Wait a minute. Where did that come from?
Yeah. Was that a firecracker?
Gee. Yeah. Was it the motorcycle backfiring? Let's see. I don't know. I mean, it's ridiculous. And then the Secret Service complicity. This is the reason why they took the body out of Dallas. They wouldn't let the coroner look at the body. Maybe they were afraid that they'd find out that, yeah, we set him up. He was hit from the front. I mean, the whole thing, the Secret Service, and I can't believe that they were out there drinking and nothing ever happened to them. When the rule says specifically that they're to be terminated. They're not to be drinking on travel status. Travel status means you're traveling with the president. Whether your shift is on or not, you're not supposed to be drinking.
Again, I understand that one a little bit more because listening to Malcolm Kilduff, if you listen to his interviews on, I think, William H. Burge's oral history site is where I've been getting a lot of Malcolm Kilduff kind of interview pieces and stuff like that. They interviewed him like 10 times, which was just interesting. He didn't agree with the magic bullet, but he agreed that there was no conspiracy. He thinks it was Oswald and that was it. But he also states about his battle with alcoholism. And a lot of it started when he started working for the White House and issues that were going, because he'd be traveling to Paris for like a month to set up trips and speech or whatever he had to do with Kennedy or Johnson or whoever. And a lot of times before even that they were comped and paid for hotel visits. He was getting sent to go to a hotel on a salary of $20 a day, and the hotel's $48. So then you're losing $28 of that. He would just find the local bar. He would also explain it in his alcoholism, trying to go to the airport. If I arrive at the airport bar at 5 a.m., my flight's at 8, I get 3 hours to drink. That means I can crush. And he would literally, the number of drinks it was a real alcoholism battle that he was explaining and talking about and being open about. The Secret Service drinking. Apparently, this was just common of the Secret Service. They had been doing this not only with JFK's administration, but Johnson's administration and other things as well, too. Again, they shouldn't be drinking. They should have lost their jobs. But this was also the climate of what I think we have a off perception about our government. You know what I mean? Like the Secret Service by J. Edgar Hoover, his FBI infiltrated movies to show that there was a code. The FBI, the villains can shoot as much as they want at the FBI agents, but they have to miss. The FBI has to come on screen and be badass. That was brainwashed and propagandized into Hollywood movies to make that mythos of the FBI agents. The Secret Service, whenever you think of them, we've always been taught that they were like these people that would protect the president. They're outstanding. We even notice now they're kind of shitty. Like they're not really good. And a lot of these guys back then were like in their 20s. So imagine someone in their 20s protecting somebody. Alcohol, all these types of things. You're not really going to hear about those unless you know someone who's involved in it at the time, or you see a documentary that focuses on it, and there really hadn't been any. The main core issue is the drinking and that climate that was going on amongst them. Maybe we just have a warped perception of what our Secret Service actually are. Maybe this is the realistic thing, and this is how they've always been. So it's actually not that surprising when you look at how many people in politics are like alcoholics and just have problems that just get hidden away because we only get a couple minutes of them in a speech or a couple minutes on camera. I mean, again, I'm not saying that they are not at fault. They are at fault. They should have lost their jobs. But I think, I don't think it's grand conspiracy of like saying that, they were drinking and they didn't give a shit about JFK. I think it was just that they were just not paying attention and not doing what we thought they should be doing. It's a reasonable perspective. You can disagree if you want.
Yeah, it's obviously some kind of neglect going on there.
Again, like I said, I'm not trying to state a hard opinion here. I'm just trying to look at, if you look at a lot of these testimonies, you look at a lot of these statements. I mean, have you found with your own stuff when you focus on Dallas police and you focus on other things that there's a lot more reasonable things or stuff that you just kind of come across? Like you put it, the best terms for me was Henry Wade, his conviction rates, Oswald, then Jack Ruby killing Oswald. It makes 100% more sense when you think about that Henry Wade just cared about his conviction rates. And then if he would have got the wrong guy and that would have been proven, that would have looked really bad on him. And history reflects that he sent a lot of people to the electric chair that were falsely sent there.
Yeah, and Oliver Stone puts that in his movie JFK, where Oswald kills Jack Ruby kills Oswald, and then the character for Jim Garrison there, Kevin Costner, he says, "Somebody just saved the Dallas DA a lot of trouble," and that's exactly what happened, because by Jack Ruby killing him, that he's never going to go to trial now. Now they don't have to prove that he's guilty.
Now, we kind of covered a lot about what we were going to kind of discuss, a lot about looking at John Connelly's testimony, and just I had some questions for you about that type of stuff. But did you ever look into Decker a little bit more? I always found it weird how people like one of that famous reporter, I'm blanking on his name right now. I think I showed you the clip already, but he talked about that he saw Jack Ruby at the press conference, and that Jack Ruby was nodding his head to Henry Wade like this. And then they asked him why about this. Again, this is from the 6-4 Museum's oral history. And he goes, "Oh, because Henry Wade and Jack Ruby were giving each other sexual favors." He said something like that, and I'm like, "What the fuck?" Like, you've never heard any of that anywhere else. But then you start hearing things like, I think in an interview that was recorded by Mary Farrell or Sylvia Meager, one of those guys, and then about Jim Mars was there. It's from a person, something Lynn. I don't know if it was a Jack Club Ruby stripper or whoever. But she stated that when Jack Ruby was in jail and prison, that Decker was taking very good care of him, would bring him anything he needs, call his family members if he needed to have his family members down there to calm him down, had like a lot of his personal things in his office, like a pillow and stuff like that, and was even rubbing his hands through his hair to calm him down when he was getting mad. I mean, that's a Dallas like police person. So you're just kind of like, that's very weird that he's doing that with the, person who killed the alleged assassin.
He was arrested with a gun, and they gave him his gun back. When they released him, they gave him his gun back. He didn't have a permit for it or anything. They gave him his gun back, the cops. So they knew when he came in the building, he had a gun. He was armed all the time because he carried money from the Carousel Club to make deposits and stuff at the bank. So he carried a gun with him all the time. The cops knew this. They knew when he came in the building. He had a gun.
I mean, did you think with any of these guys, obviously, did you learn about any of them a little bit later and kind of just, I guess, more realistic about like their corruption, or just something that would kind of reveal to you more about, just how Texas, I guess, worked?
Yeah, that's the way they did things down there. And was it Nancy Hamilton? What was her? I forget her name before that, but she was interviewed. I think I got her interview on my website. But Nancy Hamilton was interviewed by Mark Lane. I got the video. And she says that the Dallas cops drank at Jack Ruby's bar all the time for free. And they drank the best stuff in the house. They didn't give him any bar liquor. This was really the good stuff. This is the stuff they kept for the VIPs. And the Dallas cops drank for free. Not only the Dallas cops, but she said she even saw Henry Wade drinking there. So Henry Wade saying he didn't know Jack Ruby, there's a witness right there that puts him in Jack Ruby's bar. That's baloney.
I think a lot of, like we mentioned with like the cover up kind of aspect of things, I think a lot of this is just because people like in Texas and Dallas police, how they were going at the time, they didn't want Oswald and all the FBI sneaking around and looking into things. It had to something had to happen. Again, I kind of agree with you more on the fact of Jack Ruby was probably hired by someone of the Dallas police or let in there to do the deed. Not someone from like the FBI or CIA or anything like that. I 100% think that was a more Texas issue. Because they could have shut Oswald up and just kept him away from everybody and locked him up for so long, and nobody would have believed him. It was the fact that Jack Ruby killed Oswald is what made everybody kind of turn their heads like, did that just happen? A strip club owner with patriotic kind of indignation killed the alleged assassin, who apparently, if you Google this, and I think you've probably seen the clips I've done on it, Oswald never talked bad about Kennedy. He actually talked good about Kennedy. Why the hell would he take a shot at him then? But you look that up and Google it, it says conflicting statements. It's like, what are you talking about? You have the wife, you have many other people stating that Oswald only talked good about JFK. It didn't make sense that he shot Walker or took a shot at Walker and then also took a shot at Kennedy. That doesn't make sense.
Yeah, because they're on different parts of they're at different extremes of the spectrum. You know what I mean? Walker is extreme right, and Kennedy, well, I wouldn't say he's extreme left, but he was more of moderate. And with Jack Ruby, ask yourself this question: why was it that H.L. Hunt sent his security guy to the Dallas police to check on the security of Oswald. What was the purpose of that? What the hell does an oil man give a shit about what the security on Oswald is? But he sends him there on Saturday at about the time that the chief decides that he's going to transfer him on Sunday. Okay. The chief decides he's going to transfer him at 10 o'clock on Sunday morning. Now, nobody tells the sheriff this. You were talking about Sheriff Decker earlier. Nobody tells Decker this. Decker's ready for the transfer Saturday night. And he finds out from a reporter that the police have decided that they're not going to do the transfer until 10 o'clock Sunday morning. So he calls the police station and wants to know what the hell's going on. He talks to Captain Frazier, who was in charge at the time. And he says, well, what's the story with the transfer? He said, there's not going to be a transfer. Well, I'd rather transfer him here at night. And he said, well, there's not going to be any transfer, and that's the end of it. That's what he was told. That's all there is to it. There's not going to be a transfer. Now, because he had gotten, later on, he got around midnight, he got a call from the FBI claiming that they had received threats against Oswald. He wanted again to transfer him again about 1 a.m. And he had his guys ready to do that. And the Dallas police said no. The chief said 10 o'clock in the morning, that's when it's going to be done, 10 o'clock in the morning. So they claimed they tried calling the chief, but his phone was off the hook. So why didn't they send a cruiser by his house and wake his ass up? Why didn't they do that? That's what I would have done. I would have sent the cruiser over there. Find out tell the chief that we need to move him, and we need to move him now. Decker's ready. We received threats. But they didn't do that. Why?
I'm going to share this because I said it and I have to do it or everyone's going to be like, what the hell are you talking about? It was Sam Pate. Sam Pate gave an oral history for the 6th Floor Museum and he stated this.
And David Johnston was talking about the charges that's being filed, and standing immediately behind him was Henry Wade. And Henry Wade was doing, up and down gesture and a smile. And I don't know why, but I just wonder who he was smiling at. So I turned around this way, and here's Jack Ruby standing on a table in the assembly room. And he was standing there with a spiral notebook in his hand and like a pen or pencil in his hand that he was writing like he was a news reporter. Henry Wade said they didn't know Jack Ruby, but Jack Ruby knew Henry Wade real well because he was always doing sexual favors for him. And, yeah. And Bill Decker, too.
Again, you get a lot of shit in the assassination. I'm just giving you a heads up. There's a lot of stuff out there and a lot of things. I can't verify that. It's funny. It's interesting. But when I'm coming across a lot of this just with the channel and comments and stuff like that. And there's a lot of stuff like I feel like we've talked about, other people have talked about. It's very kind of known that that's not true, or this is true, or this is what it was, or this was. And a lot of people are running off stuff like Secret Service, all this type of stuff. And I'm seeing more channels trending and talking about it now because the hearings went out there. And again, I don't know, with the whole Roscoe White situation, that whole thing, it all keeps getting brought up and brought up and brought up. And it's like, just, you've mentioned it before we even started recording. Stop focusing on the who. Let's just focus. We got a lot of information out there, and we kind of need to fact check a lot of this stuff before we all keep going into our independent theories. And I'm not saying who did it. I'm not saying there was even a conspiracy. I do believe conspiracy and a cover-up for sure. I think there's way more evidence to support that there was a cover-up going on. So that means they could have got the wrong guy and he's dead. So to avoid a lot of hassle and other things, we might just bury it here. Because you even have the FBI investigating leads way down the line. So your opinion on the whole who did it, stop worrying about it, and what we should be focusing on now, Gil.
Well, this is the reason why I got off of that. In the beginning, I was doing the same thing, but every time I read a book, they made all kinds of sense because they all had evidence to support what they were saying. The mafia did it, Castro did it, Castro and the Russians did it, and then the driver did it, the guy in the backup car did it, Roscoe White did it, the CIA did it. Everybody did it. The organized crime was there. They did it, and I think that all of these people, when it comes to the CIA and and the organized crime. I think that they had those people. Those people were there, and a lot of right-wing extremists too, including Joseph Miltier, was in Dallas to see this event. They knew ahead of time this was going to happen. And so they were there because they wanted to be a witness to this. This is historical, right? And just to show you how bad it was, the way the FBI handled this investigation, when they went to Miltier and they asked him, because he's the one who they had on the recording saying that it was easy to kill the president. You shoot him from an office building with a high-powered rifle, and then they'd pick up somebody shortly after and blame them for it, and all of this stuff that he said, they had on recording. They had it recorded. So they go to his house in Quitman, Georgia, and they say to him, "Did you say this?" And he says, "No, he never said it." Right there on the spot, they should have arrested him for making false statements to a federal agent. They should have arrested him right on the spot. They said, "Oh, you didn't say that? Okay, fine." They turn around and they let it go. They had him. They had the recording of him saying it, and he denied saying it. He should have arrested him right on the spot, taken him to the FBI office, and tell us, "Now you're going to tell us where you heard this. Where did you get this from? Because if you don't, you're going to jail for 5 years, because that's what the penalty is: 5 years in prison for lying to a federal agent. So you either tell us where you got it from, or you're going to jail for the next 5 years."
Or even the dumbass excuse from James Rowley stating, why didn't Thomas Kelly videotape or grab a recorder for the Oswald interrogation? And James Rowley was like, well, maybe he didn't have the funds, or, he couldn't find a recorder for the Oswald. It's like, what? The guy who is working for the Secret Service doesn't have the funds to go. Are you spending it all on booze? That's the main question.
The Dallas police, if you look at the floor plan of the Dallas police station, they had a recording room. They had a recording room. They had the ability to record them. And even if they didn't, if the tape recorder was broken or something, they had a courthouse. They had court stenographers. They could have brought a court stenographer in. They didn't even do that. Why? Because they don't want anybody to know what he's saying in that interrogation session. That's why. Whatever Oswald's saying, they're going to tell the story, okay? They're going to say he said this and he said that. They don't want people to know the truth. That's the reason why it was never recorded, either transcribed or on a tape. They never recorded it because they don't want anybody to know the truth. They don't want them to know what he's saying.
I think it's because they got the wrong guy, and then next thing you know,
yeah, they got the wrong guy, and they don't want him to say it. Well, okay, where did you get the gun from? Oh, I bought it in Fort Worth. How the hell do I know he said that? That's what the cops are saying he said. But there's no proof that he said that. Anything that he said that the cops say he said, there's no proof of. They got nothing. I mean, it's ridiculous. I think that they got the wrong guy. I think they arrested the wrong guy. And this is the reason why we're talking about different theories and stuff. You can get into some of these theories and go down rabbit holes. It'll take you years to get out of that freaking rabbit hole. You know what I mean? It's just a waste of time. So I stopped doing that. Well, like I said, at the beginning, that's what I was doing, trying to solve it. Instead of trying to solve it, let's take a look at the evidence in the case and find out if this case is real or not. And that was my research. And I've come to the conclusion that no, Oswald was the wrong guy. They arrested the wrong guy. Even they claimed that all of these witnesses identified Oswald in the police lineup. It was all positive identifications. No, it wasn't. Helen Markham said in her testimony, at first I wasn't sure. That's not a positive identification. A positive identification is when they bring him in and the witness says, that's the guy. That's the guy. Are you sure? I'm positive. Are you willing to testify to that? That's the guy I saw shoot the police officer. That's the guy I saw on the 6th floor with the rifle. That's the guy right there. No doubt in my mind. She said, at first, I wasn't sure. Why not? He looked right at you. Why are you not sure? But she says that she was surrounded in a room with police officers, and they kept asking her, which one, which one, which one? Well, 3 of them you can eliminate because they're not even dressed like him. You know what I mean? She knew that the three police employees wasn't him, so it all came down to Oswald. You think she would have get away with this lineup if there was a lawyer present? If Oswald had a lawyer present, he would never have allowed this. That lineup was unfair as the day is long. Why would they do that? Because they had the wrong guy. That's why. Like I was telling you before, all they cared about were their conviction rates. Whoever they arrested was the guilty party. We'll make the evidence fit later. But this is the guy we arrested. That's the guy that did it. And even in the Texas theater when he was arrested, one witness said they heard the police say, "Kill the president, will you?" Kill the president? Where the hell did you get that from? This is a guy who slipped into a theater. You tell me he slipped into a theater to beat the theater out of a 90-cent ticket, and he had $13.87 on his person when he was arrested. This is what you're arresting him for? How do you know he killed the president? Because he slipped into a theater without paying? Come on. Ridiculous. But you have all of these theories out there. They're even arguing on the forum about whether or not the guy in the doorway is Oswald or Billy Lovelady. That was decided it was Lovelady years ago. I got pictures of Lovelady in the police station wearing the same shirt the guy's wearing on the steps. So how can you say that's Oswald? But they're arguing, oh, that's Oswald. No, that's not Oswald. Why are you pushing this misinformation? I got an email from somebody, some woman. I don't believe if it was a woman. I believe it was somebody else. That I was the worst researcher in the world because I wouldn't admit that this was Oswald on his front steps. It wasn't Oswald. That's the picture of the guy peeking around the corner in Alton 6, in the Alton 6 photograph. That's Billy Lovelady. He's wearing the same shirt. Oh, no, he was wearing a striped shirt that day. No, he wasn't, because the picture in the Dallas police station shows him wearing the same shirt. They walk Oswald right by him. It's on video. And I got a picture of the capture photograph off that video. That's Billy Lovelady. And then they turn around and ask Wesley Frazier during that fake Oswald trial there, that on trial Lee Harvey Oswald, that special they asked, they get him on the stand, and Gary Spence asked him, he says, "You know who that man is?" And shows him. He says, "Yeah, that's Billy Lovelady." He identified him as Billy Lovelady. Yeah, it is, because he was wearing the same shirt. I mean, the photograph itself is a little foggy, but you can tell the way the shirt is. It's got big squares on it. Big squares. It's not striped. And but they're still arguing about silly stuff like that. Why waste your time with nonsense like that? All you do is you make the rest of us that are trying to get to the truth, and that are legitimate researchers and trying to get to the truth. You make us look like idiots by doing stuff like that. It's a black stain on the.
I don't mind if they look into something like that, but I just don't want them like going around and telling the whole world and acting like it's 100% fact. It's like, dude.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
Theory, any idea, any thought process that comes in the assassination that hasn't been documented or something like that needs to be taken as, in my opinion, in my belief, in this understanding, in that type. It needs to be explained like that, so people can go, all right, show me what you got. But most people are commenting about I have people that comment all the time, like, I was alive at that time. What makes you think you know more than me? I go, first of all, the more time has moved on, the more has came out. So if anything, I would know more than you would know more when it came to, you were alive at the time, you watched one thing and then you never looked into it again. Like, it's about getting into it. A lot of the documents are now getting released, and a lot of stuff that a lot of people aren't diving in and talking to people. I'm talking to HSCA people, Assassination Records Review. I've talked to hundreds of researchers, and I've also done a lot of my own documents, and I'm just trying to look at it. I'm not stating an opinion on things, but you have a lot of people that are running with things that I'm sure they heard from Jim DiEugeno's book or somebody's book. And it's like, if you spoke to those people, it's not saying that they're wrong or they don't have good information, but a lot of people in the JFK world are JFK fanboys. That means no sexual scandals going on with JFK. None of this can point bad or look bad at JFK. And again, it's a healthy balance in the middle. Doesn't mean he was a bad person. It was a human being. So there's goods and bads. So you need to understand it like that. And again, that's what makes it so freaking hard when some people are like going on like he would have 100% pulled out of Vietnam. I was like, I'm sure he would have, but I don't have anything to tell you that this is him pulling out. The last thing was the involvement of more troops. Johnson went in there, and apparently from George Reedy's interview, he stated that Johnson looked at the Kennedy people looked at the Johnson people, and they were wondering, what should we do next? Johnson said, I'm going to continue with what Kennedy was doing, and it's supplying more troops. If you listen to Johnson's phone calls, he does not give a shit about NAM until like 64 or 65. He's more concerned about the press talking shit on him, which I'm sure that's all he wanted to worry about as president. All he wanted to care about was domestic issues. But then
he was worried about getting reelected.
The Vietnam issue came up, and again, you hear him later on just be like, this has fucking ruined me. Like, this is like, he's talking about so much like, why the hell are we even over there? it makes a different perception of Johnson than everyone saying that Kennedy was killed because Johnson wanted to go into the Vietnam War and they needed the Vietnam War to happen. I don't think that's likely, but if you want to believe that, that's fine. There's some evidence to support, I guess. But again, this is just finding a logical basis. Why was Kennedy killed? I'm sure there could be multifactorial. Who was Kennedy killed by? Well, the record says Oswald. I think there's a lot of evidence to support the fight that we should be fighting is that Oswald was not the shooter from the 6-4 depository. And if he was not alone in doing that act. So again, I think we need to focus on that main question. Gil, I think we've done many conversations about so much about the assassination. I've always appreciated the ones we have done, and us kind of doing these episodes together and having good conversations about it as well too. I want to give you a minute to promote your links because we have been talking close to up to 2 hours on this. Is there a place where people can find your links? I know you got your website, giljesus.com, but also your YouTube channel. I think you have 2 of them, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, I got the JFK 63 conspiracy and just Gil Jesus on YouTube. And then my website is gil-jesus.com. Now, one more thing I would just want to add to what you was just talking about. To completely understand the assassination, I may have said this earlier when we started, to completely understand the assassination, you must understand its context within history, within the Kennedy administration. And that means taking a look at Kennedy, what he was doing. Like you said, there was a lot of stuff that he was doing that was bumming the Secret Service out, like he's playing around with girls and women and stuff. And this was really bothering the Secret Service and their morale. Morale was low. There's a lot of other things that are involved here that would lead you to believe why these groups were willing to see him gone. And like you said, there's a lot to the story here, and there's a lot of skeletons in the closets that may have been that people didn't want exposed. So it was easier just to blame Oswald. But that's about it.
Again, Gil, thank you for the time. And again, everybody, thank you for listening to this episode of Out of the Blank. You can check out Gil's other episodes as well, too, on the channel and on other shows as well. Just look at some of the stuff for yourself. You go through the documents, go through some of the audio clips, listen to things, do some research. Don't just take something that somebody wrote in a book and run off with it. You don't even have to take what we say and run off with it. Make your own informed opinion on things. Like there's a lot of things that you'll hear in the research community I'm sure you can run off with. And it's not saying that they're wrong. But again, the best thing you can do is always just state in your opinion or in your research on the assassination. Be kind of positive more about it to open it up to more people that would like to get involved in this as well, too. I mean, I'm diving into the whole Vietnam era now just because I'm fascinated with LBJ and I'm fascinated with the whole Vietnam kind of discussion and how that went for however many years. So again, thank you everybody for listening to this episode of Out of the Blank. Stay tuned for our next episode.